air jail because you've confined your cat into the air and it's jail. And that's how you
Cat
can.
air jail.
I mean, I know it works really well for dogs. I think it would work for cats too. I mean, probably just go to a groomer for the first time you're getting her nails done. But like, I have some tips for you to not like lose a lot of flesh in the process.
We have gone live, listeners, but I promise that Erin is talking about how to trim a cat's nails, not how to punish a bad cat. So just know that this is all, on the up and up.
Air jail.
Well, yeah, there's some places nearby. I'm gonna look into it, but
there we go. On that note, let's begin a podcast. Wait, we don't have to clap. What am I doing? Okay. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Star Wars Generations podcast. Today we're talking about animation. And this is obviously like about half, probably more than half of the full content hours of Star Wars are in animation. We've talked a lot about various kinds of animation, but we're going to be giving a little more focus over the next couple of months. We've done now our full reviews of all the movies, and so we want to start shifting into some of the shows. And we're going to start with a number of the animated shows because there's quite a lot of them. And a lot of them were being made long before the live action got started. And so over the next couple weeks and months, we're going to be taking a look at each of the different Star Wars animated shows. And yes, this does include the original Clone Wars and Tales of the Jedi and all the good stuff. Doing an episode on each. Then we're going to be doing coverage of Andor when it comes out. And then probably after Andor, we're going to switch into doing more, not full episode by episode, but like really getting to talk about some of our favorite episodes from each season of Clone Wars and then on to Rebels, etc. But today we're going to take even more of a wider lens to kick all this off and talk about Star Wars animation itself and what role it plays and how we feel about it and how we feel about it compared to other versions of telling Star Wars stories. And of course, I'm here with my two co-hosts, Alex and Erin. And let me just kick it to you all. Star Wars is something that starts with live action, and we know most of these characters in live action. How do we feel about it being animated?
Is that a joke? It's obviously the best. No, I absolutely grew up on the Clone Wars. I remember A New Hope, I think, from when I was really young. And then I remember bits from The Phantom Menace. But honestly, my earliest Star Wars memories, things that I really remember and my favorite characters, all of that came from the Clone Wars. So Star Wars animation has always been very close to my heart. That's why Ahsoka is my favorite and I cosplay her.
Nice. And Ahsoka is probably the most famous of the characters who started in animation. And then only much later did we get a live action version of her. So she doesn't kind of reverse of what I was talking about. Great example of that. Alex, what about yourself?
Yeah, I feel kind of similar. I mean, I definitely think I remember the movies first and foremost, but back before streaming services and you could watch everything in a row, I just remember as a kid just haphazardly watching random episodes of the Clone Wars as they came on TV, and I wouldn't really be able to follow the consistent storylines. There's really just little pop-in adventures with the characters here and there. But I was always enthralled by it. I got really excited about it. I would make my mom buy me Lego sets from the Clone Wars shows. My little Ahsoka minifigures and the animated version of Mace Windu minifigure and stuff like that. But I think that animation as a general medium really opens the door for a lot of things you just can't do in live action, whether it's budgetary or technology limitations, stuff like that. And you can explore, I find that people are more willing to accept more kind of out there storylines in an animation setting than they are in a live action setting a lot of times. So things like Mortis and the Clone Wars or the Loth Wolves traveling through space-time and Rebels, those types of things I feel really they thrive in an animation setting and kind of open the door for live action to take more risks in the future once those terms and things have been established in animation. So all that to be said, I love the animation. Some of my favorite things that exist in Star Wars are animated. So
yeah. No, I totally get that. And I think you're right, especially about that point about how animation lets you, it has so fewer barriers. It has a lot less barriers. Let me take that whole thing again. No, I totally get what you're saying. And I think especially that idea that animation has a lot less barriers in terms of what you can do with it, in terms of just creating entire, there's a couple of episodes of the Clone Wars that happen entirely underwater. on the
Mhm.
planet that the Mal Calamari and the Quarren come from, and like other stuff like that would be just impossible to do live action. And even more so, and I've applied this as well, I think, to like the Justice League show compared to a lot of DC live action shows. You can do such a wider range, as you were saying, of plot lines, of stories, and of characters. Think about how, like in the Mandalorian, in the show Boba Fett, we have like an episode and a half that focuses entirely on Mandalorian, and people went nuts and they were so upset about it because this is supposed to be Boba Fett's show. But the Clone Wars, like, yeah, you can say who are like the main characters, but we had a 3-episode arc about a like 8-inch tall Jedi that no one had ever heard of leading a band of droids that none of us had seen except for R2 before. What?
He was not a Jedi. Are we talking about the droid episodes?
Oh, that's right. He was like a little general.
He was just
right?
he was like a commander or something, and he was like, "No, I'm the general," and they were like, "Okay, commander." It was really disrespectful. That's why I remember this so well.
That's right. That's right. Okay.
What a
But
silly
my
little
point
arc
is,
that was.
like, I'm not saying that's the best arc we ever had, but like you get to do that, man.
But it's interesting.
Yeah.
What a silly little arc that was.
You know, Sarah Hayashi, who was a co-host of this podcast for a while, listen to her episodes about those Clone Wars episodes. She loved that, and I want to honor that.
She did. I remember
I
those
will say-
episodes.
Right? And I will say, I love this because I was a very reluctant fan of Star Wars animation. I've come to truly love it. I think that it fills in the gaps in some ways and is not only really great, but as you were saying, helps me to understand and enjoy a lot more of the live action stuff a lot more. But it took me a while to get it. And I think I've talked about before about how like I was a fan who didn't really enjoy the prequels, was kind of turned off by them, and so kind of separated myself from Star Wars for a long time. And the first thing I'd heard about the Clone Wars was the Clone Wars movie, which I think is generally regarded as not the best. It does introduce us to Ahsoka and some cool ideas, but I think if you just put it up against a lot of the Clone Wars show itself, it's pretty near the bottom of the barrel. And it was also perceived, and this is maybe not fair, but it was very much presented and perceived as very much a young, not even just a kids show, but like a young kids show. So for me, at like 22, 23, it was pretty easy to be like, this is not for me. I'm just not interested. And it took Paul, another co-host of both this and Superhero Ethics, really kind of twisting my arm at a point in my life when I really needed something to focus on to get me to watch the Clone Wars. And a lot of it came because he'd been pushing me to watch Batman the Animated Series. Because I think I was definitely one of those people who was like, oh, I love live action, animation, that's for kids, that's silly stuff. And I'll happily admit that because I now know how incredibly wrong I was. And so it was Batman the Animated Series and then Justice League, and then he got me to watch the Clone Wars, which I continue to think is one of the best Star Wars properties out there, and helps for me, it makes the prequels a lot better, because it helps to fill in those kind of gaps. And we'll talk about how Resistance, I think, does similar things with the sequel movies. So yeah, it was quite a journey, but I've come, I think, to a very similar place to you too.
Yeah, it's such a great addition to the Star Wars story, being able to do those like little intricate things and get to know the characters. Like, I grew up with such a love for like Ayla Secura and Luminara Unduli, who are like barely mentioned. I don't even think they have lines really in the Phantom Menace and, well, actually just the whole prequels. I think they're featured on and off. But like the episodes in season 1 of the Clone Wars where Ayla teaches, Ahsoka about like, yes, you care for your master and he's hurting, but you standing by his side is not going to do anything. You need to like get up, get your head right, and go get shit done. Yeah. And that was like such just a powerful message for me as a little girl. Like I just absolutely clung on to that little episode arc. I loved it. And yeah, so that's something I've really loved is how it delves into these characters that are just kind of glimpsed on screen. Or like, Aura Singh was just like a rando in Phantom Menace. They just wanted some cool alien, and people loved her so much that they gave her a whole ass background and everything during the Clone Wars. Yeah. Like, it's really cool to see what they can do.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I think that the idea of being able to take these very minor characters and really explore them. You know, Plo Koon and some of the other Jedi who, you know, just we see them a little bit in the Clone Wars and they get killed, and it's supposed to kind of hit hard. And I think for me it just didn't, and that's, you know, no grief to anybody who it really did, but because I just didn't know who any of these people are. And learning so much more about each of them and getting each of them to have their own episodes and their own backgrounds, and also just seeing how they all interact. Like, we're talking here specifically about Clone Wars, but I think this is true a lot of things. You know, just the breadth of getting to see so many different characters really just adds so much for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, like, I don't know. I think that they all, you know, having an animated show where it's 20-minute episodes, you know, like, you know, I know right now we're talking about the Clone Wars, and in the Clone Wars, it really lets you not only dive into characters, but it lets you hash out like storylines and things that are brought up in the movies that you just can't really dig into. And even like species, like, I mean, they went basically and like looked at the species in the canteen in episode 4 and said, how many of these species can we now hash out into full blown like characters and arcs, and like, you know, you can learn about their planet. And now, you know, you hop into the cantina in the original Star Wars movie, and I can pick out a bunch of, you know, specific aliens and different species that I couldn't ever do that before, because, you know, they didn't really have names or anything when Lucas, I'm sure, first created them. And now you have entire stories and characters that we love and know about them. And I think that makes the shows really special. And even ones that don't necessarily like dive into that, like, you know, like Rebels, it really fills in the gaps in our knowledge when it came out about like what was going on before the rebellion was fully enforced, Attack of the Empire. How did this start? Where were the Jedi? It's just a lot of questions we had that are answered in a really succinct and cool way that maybe otherwise never would have gotten answered.
Yeah. And I think that last point especially is true because, you know, as much as I think we all love an awful lot of Star Wars, I think a complaint that often comes up that I think there's some truth to is that sometimes plot lines are introduced without the background to it being explained enough that it feels kind of out of nowhere. Like, I remember in the Phantom Menace sort of feeling like, well, this is interesting, but like, I thought we had a New Republic. Like, what happened? How did this all come to be? And similarly with some of the prequel stuff, like, how did it fall so fast that all the people of the galaxy were willing to turn on the Jedi so easily? And shows like Clone Wars and Rebels and Resistance, I think, all really help to tell that story in these really incredible ways.
I agree. I really enjoyed watching Resistance because I wouldn't say that I've ever had beef with the sequel trilogy, but it certainly is not my favorite. I've come to like it a lot more now that we did like the watch through together and discussed it all. Like, I have a lot of interest in those movies. I do like them a lot. But back then I didn't really like, I hadn't even seen Rise of Skywalker more than one time. I was like, but it really got me reinterested in that time period when we saw the family member of somebody on those New Republic planets.
Yeah.
You know, when they are destroyed by Star Killer Base, you know, and it just all these planets, and we see like all these politicians just die and it's just kind of like over and it's nothing. But we get to follow a character closely who has like a parent there and just see like, it was interesting. I think it's similar to, you know, how Clone Wars can affect Revenge of the Sith, but like that aspect had never really like hit me hard. I think it hit me hard maybe the first time or two I watched the movie, but it's kind of like, okay, and then that happens, and then that happens. But just like we got a really, I mean, it was a cartoon show, so as visceral as you can on a cartoon show, like this reaction to that massive a tragedy.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that's a type of tragedy we can't even imagine on our world, because that's worlds being destroyed. And I liked having a little more of an inside view on that. Whereas in the films, they just have places to go and, you know, there's emotional beats for it, but they have to continue telling the story. And so I liked having time for a deeper emotional moment.
You know, it's funny. I never really put this together before, but I was thinking about the destruction of, like, I don't even know the name of the worlds that are destroyed by Starkiller Base and Phantom in
Force Awakens.
Force Awakens.
Thank you. And And like, I don't know much about Alderaan, but in A New Hope, because we get to see Alderaan destroyed through the eyes of Princess Leia, like we see, she gets to talk. She says, it's a peaceful planet. It's, she talks about it, and we see the grief with her. We don't get that at all in Starkiller Base. We have it's just like, oh no, our government's been destroyed, our whole fleet is destroyed, and there's no real explanation of why like everything was concentrated on this one planet or this one like group of planets, because I guess a bunch of planets get destroyed. But it's, as you said, it's so over and done with, and they talk about it as this great strategic loss, but not as a like, oh my god, we just lost our family. But the Resistance episode about it had me sobbing, because it just it makes it that personal story in a way that I think was so important, and that I think happens so often. In a lot of these shows, I think especially Rebels did this, but also, we get to see, we know intellectually that there are Wookiee slaves who are being used to build the Death Star. But in Rebels, we get to meet some of them and see them being rescued and see the ones who don't get rescued. And in Clone Wars, we get to see just how devastating this war is to all these different planets. And one of my favorite episodes is of this like kind of pacifist planet of these like kind of muskrat, animated muskrat folks who have Australian accents for reasons I don't quite understand, or South African accents or something like that.
I think they're Scottish, actually.
They
But
look
that's
like
the
lemurs
episode
to me.
They do
Lemurs,
look like
yeah,
lemurs.
thank you.
That's the one I was talking about that features Ayla Sakura and Ahsoka working closely together. That arc is very
you're right.
I
You're right,
agree.
yeah.
It's like the aspect. Sorry, I took over talking.
No, go for it. Please go ahead.
The aspects of like culture. Like, I mean, I'm gonna be honest, guys. I'm white. I was raised somewhat very sheltered. So like culture isn't something I've been very aware of, and it's something I'm learning a lot in school because I'm becoming a nurse, and you need to be aware of people's cultures so you're not a bad fucking nurse. I would say before I got to this point, since I was 15, I've become very cultured on purpose. I do my very best to learn about other cultures, but it was so interesting to see it just so nuanced in a kid's show.
Yeah.
Of like the big questions of like, what does it mean for like a really strong culture? Well, like, yes, this is their healer. Everything defers to the chief. We are peaceful people. We will not fight no matter what. And as well as the concept of pacifists in a world war and the positions they're put into. And it's just so many concepts wrapped up in like 3 episodes. It's just really well done.
Yeah. I mean, it does. I think the Clone Wars does do a really good job at like introducing kids to like the realities of war, some of the realities of what these villains in the show who are trying to commit not only overt like genocide, but others who are like much more like behind the scenes, like how the banking clan, and how like economics and money powers warmongering, and it draws. I mean, Lucas has drawn inspiration from World War II history before, but it's interesting to see like how like it's introduced to children, and not like maybe the first couple of seasons is a little more watered down, but the Clone Wars becomes pretty gruesome at some points. I mean, you see like heads roll and like slavery and whipping, and I mean it's they don't really sugarcoat it, especially it goes on. It's kind of like it matured as the audience matured with it, which I think is when like Percy Jackson books did that, and like a lot of other like pieces of media would do that. And I think it's really cool when it does. But it's just really interesting to see some of the topics of Clone Wars tackled that like I was being introduced to as a young child and like didn't really wasn't really able to understand or process until I got older. And it makes me want to revisit the shows so much more now, because it just it's interesting. Like I as a kid you don't really think about that stuff, but as an adult you're like, damn, this show really works for kids, teenagers, adults, anyone who wants to watch it. And again, that's just the Clone Wars. Rebels has its own challenges and topics that it really touches on really well. And I think that all the shows kind of have their own little things that they're really strong at touching on, that are both real world applicable and an escape for people to just watch.
Yeah. Well, I think it allows us to take a pause and the movies are always by definition like they need to be fairly fast paced. And I know people often say that like A New Hope and M are very slow compared to today's movies, but even so, like we don't spend time with the people of Alderaan. We don't spend time with the slaves or the oppressed people in different places, and getting to see that and both the kind of like the heroic side, but also I think one of the complaints sometimes of the original Star Wars is that it has a very kind of black and white morality. And I think that misses the point, but I think there is some truth to it. But in some of these shows, like, we see a lot of like seemingly good people who are with the Separatists and people who like, the Bad Batch, especially for me, seeing just how devastated these people's lives were by the Clone Wars. And now someone comes along who says, don't worry, I'm making this an empire and we're going to bring everyone safety again. And we're going to make everything great again. I'm, drawing a little comparison there, but like that, I think it helps to explain why people look to authoritarianism. Why? Because it's easy to just say like, oh, the emperor just came in with guns and took over. But the thing is, the emperor convinced most of the people that they wanted to be in an empire, or at least enough of the people. And that's a much harder concept to grasp, and I think the shows have done a phenomenal job of it.
And if I could hop in just on this topic, one more thing. Like I think of 2 episodes specifically that I think does a really good at like touching on these things. And one of them is, Erin actually named herself Uncle Anno's lifeless body. Rip.
Please.
But in the show, like he is technically, he is a flawed individual, but he is at heart, at least we were led to believe like a good person who joined the Separatists.
You want to give like a quick quick summary for those who don't know who Uncle Ono is?
Yeah. So like, he is a Rodian, who is the senator for Rhodia, and he basically like makes a deal with the Separatists because his people are starving, they're being blockaded, they can't they're dying, and so he decides to cave to pressure and basically like let the Separatists roll in. And it's like shows you when being squeezed by powerful people, when desperation sets in, good people can make bad choices for survival, and like how that happens. And this is how a lot of authoritarians will take charge. And then the other episode I think of, but it's to me one of the best and most underrated episodes in the Clone Wars is when Ahsoka joins I'm gonna say her name wrong, Mira Aaron, help me. The Separatist planet, or Matthew, someone help me.
Oh, Mina Bonteri?
Thank you. Say it again. Mina Bontarian.
Mina Bonteri.
Mina Bontarian.
Terry.
Yeah, so
whatever.
she is a old friend of Padme's and is in the Separatist, their version of the Senate, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what they call themselves, but
I think it's the Senate.
I think okay, yeah. And so like you see like the Separatist worlds are not these, a lot of times you like to think of the other side as like, East Berlin and West Berlin. Like it's just like, one side is it looks completely different from the other side, and it's all, built up differently. And it's not like the planet looks like any other like, planet with its its rich elite and its normal working class. And these people generally believe that they are resisting a corrupt republic that, succumbs to corporations. And you're like, wow, wait,
Which
the way that
there's some real truth to.
There is. I'm like, wait a minute.
Wrong.
Like the Separatists, I kind of agree with their philosophy. And they are led to believe that like Count Dooku and, obviously they don't know that the shadow of the Sith is ruling them all. Or they don't see the genocide that goes on in the battles. They believe that they're genuinely rebelling against a corrupt republic, which the republic is also corrupt. So it just shows you that like no war, no conflict is super clear cut. There's no like completely right or completely wrong answers to these questions. And it just makes it, because as a kid, you really think like it's very clean cut, like good, bad. But even a lot of the people that lived in Nazi Germany did not know what was going on and believe that they were being saved from poverty and the remnants of World War I. Like it's not like every German citizen was, like the Nazi soldiers and the atrocities they were committing. It just makes you realize how complex war is. And that is something that's being tackled in a kid show targeted at elementary school age children. That is insane to me. And sorry, that is just super cool to me. And a really special thing that I think very few shows, still do. That was a lot. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Aaron?
No, and if I can just hop on the back end of that, or maybe the middle part, where you were talking about the episode with Mina Bonteri and Padme and Ahsoka, and the episode title is just very poignant. It's called Heroes on Both Sides. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and honestly, there are a lot of things in which I feel like the shows sometimes not only help fill in the gaps, but kind of save things from the original movies. Because that line, hero on both sides, is from the opening crawl of Revenge of the Sith. And I remember remembering it because it was such a batshit stupid line. Because I was like, until then, we'd had no discussion whatsoever about, the idea that there could be some good parts to the Separatists. Like, it had seemed in Attack of the Clones like they were making some real points. But then I was like, oh no, mwahaha, Dooku is just doing all this because he's working with Sidious, and it's all these evil corporate people who are doing it. And so the line seems so out of nowhere in the crawl for Revenge of the Sith. But then when we get to that episode, it really kind of like explains what that line meant. And I feel like now when I watch that opening crawl, I'm not like angry at that, that line the same way. Let me switch gears then to another thing that I think comes up for a lot of people, which is the voice acting, especially that we have a number of established characters where they seem to sometimes get the voice actors from the original, and a lot of the characters in this are totally original. Ahsoka being like one of the most well-known, but so many others too.
All the clones also.
Yeah, all the clones, etc. But there was a lot of characters who we did know and love, or not love, but who got different voice actors in this. Now, Aaron, for you, am I right that like, so, and so for example, this was one of the things that I was kind of hesitant about watching the show because I was like, I know what Obi-Wan is supposed to sound like. I know what Yoda and Mace Windu are supposed to sound like. I don't want these other people voicing them. But for you, did you get used to the voices of the Clone Wars shows first and then have kind of the reverse of like you watch the prequels and are like, wait, that's not what Obi-Wan's voice sounds like?
As a kid, they sounded damn similar to me. I don't even think I knew what Obi-Wan sounded like, but to be fair, Matthew, you grew up with Ewan McGregor. I'm sorry, you grew up with Alec Guinness as your Obi-Wan. We grew up with Ewan McGregor as our Obi-Wan. And I saw Ewan McGregor. I'm sorry. Jeez, I keep mixing up names. I'm going to start that over. To be fair, Matthew, you grew up with Alec Guinness as your Obi-Wan, while we grew up with Ewan McGregor as our Obi-Wan. And I was introduced to Alec Guinness in the originals first, but like growing up, I watched the prequels a lot more. And so I always found that, oh God, what is his name now? Oh my God. Arnold, what is Obi-Wan's voice actor's name?
James Arnold Taylor, excuse you.
God, I had a stroke for a minute. I had a stroke for a minute, please.
The answer is actually always and forever Alec Guinness, but go ahead.
James Arnold Taylor sounds so similar to Ewan McGregor, in my opinion, like that it didn't even bother me as a kid. And, I think Hayden and Matt sounded very similar as well. To me, they were the same.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Aaron.
Yeah, for me, no, it's okay. I would say actually the voice for Obi-Wan I grew up with was James Arnold Taylor. Like, because I wasn't allowed to watch Revenge of the Sith when I was little, and nobody else liked Attack of the Clones. So there wasn't too much to go off of. And I just watched the Clone Wars so much that I remember watching the live action. And there was a few characters, like Padme's voice sounds very different. Because again, I got used to her voice in the Clone Wars. And then I watched it and I was like, it's like Uncanny Valley, where it's so similar, but just off enough that I was like, what? And then I was like, well, duh, like it's voice actors. These are different people. But like you said, Alex, damn good job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It actually was more jarring for me to get used to, because for me, Ashley Eckstein, is it Eckstein or Eckstein? Have we ever confirmed that one or the other? It's Eckstein, right?
I believe it's
Eckstein.
Okay, well, regardless, her that is she is Ahsoka to me. She has always been Ahsoka to me. And like her voice was very, very distinct. So when Rosario Dawson stepped in as live action Ahsoka, it took me, even though she's like a grown up adult version, it takes a lot of cognitive dissonance in my brain to try and put that as the same character, because in my brain I'm like, Ahsoka sounds this way, and you do not sound even close to her.
Yes, it's interesting. Well, first of all, I defer to Aaron in all things Ahsoka. So, Aaron, if you think it's pronounced Eckstein, then I will go with that.
Did you say Eckstein? I'm sorry.
That's what I usually say, but please don't quote me. Like, I've never asked her personally.
Well,
you've heard it here. Known Ahsoka expert, Aaron.
No,
he is
please.
quoted as saying it is Eckstein. No, I either way, it does not matter. It does matter to the character, to the person, and so if someone actually knows it for sure, let us know. But yeah, it's weird. Ahsoka never threw me because I know that Rosario is playing a much older version, and so of course the voice changed, and I think actually was very good at portraying that it's a young person's voice. The voice of Obi-Wan never really threw me because, for me, I never thought Ewan McGregor sounded like Obi-Wan. So though the idea that this guy Jason didn't sound like Ewan McGregor didn't really matter to me because neither of them are Obi-Wan. Alec Guinness is Obi-Wan because again, that's just like I imprinted on it like a baby duck when I was 4 years old. The ones that I think like Yoda's voice sometimes threw me. Mace Windu's definitely threw me some.
Mace for sure.
Oh yeah, Mace throws you for a loop every time.
Yeah, and part of that's because like Samuel Jackson has such a distinctive voice, and
it's so iconic.
It felt like that voice actor was trying to do an imitation of that instead of trying to do a similar voice. But I will say, and here is how I used to think about it, and I'm just explaining where I was coming from. I had always thought that the acting of Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman in the sequels was not very good. Having seen him in other things and seeing her in other things, I've come to believe that that's mostly about bad dialogue and bad directing. It's not necessarily on them. But I there was nothing about Hayden Christensen that ever felt to me like this is a person who could grow up to be Darth Vader. It just didn't click for me, and that's totally fine. It did for other people, and that's awesome.
I love you, Hayden.
But the point for me is that because of that, like I've joked sometimes, but it's true. The animated versions, like I felt like, if nothing else, the chemistry between those two voice actors felt so much stronger than, and I just, the acting to me felt much better. And I think because of that, like I connected to their story and I bought their romance in a way I was never really able to do in the prequel movies. And so that like, there's a lot of ones where I was like, this doesn't sound right. But this was like, oh, wait, no, you sound different. That's good. Like, I really like these versions a lot better. And everyone's different on that, and that's totally fine. But it's just one more way in which I think it's interesting how like animation can offer you a different perspective on characters.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I want to just say,
go ahead. No, you go. Oh, you go.
When it comes to Anakin, I thought you were going to say something slightly different, Matthew. Because I've heard you say it before, how like, I think you may have mentioned it, but like Matt's portrayal of Anakin really gets you to believe that that's Darth Vader. And it's like, it was very similar for me, even though I did grow up watching the prequels, because I never watched Revenge of the Sith. And I know intellectually, yep, that Darth Vader, Luke's father. I know these things. But there was no really way for me to watch The Fall when I was younger.
Yeah. And
the beautiful subtleties they do. I mean, down to putting the Imperial March behind things when Anakin fucks up and like kills someone that he shouldn't have.
But it's like a subtle Imperial March.
Yeah, it's like it's just like of the dark side theme, you know?
It's like way in the background. But it gets your chills going, and it's like, no, I get it. Like, even as a kid, I was like, oh, that's not a good sign.
And part of that may have nothing to do with the actors. It's just, again, the benefit of, 100 episodes versus 2 movies.
Right. Because if you have Hayden Christensen, if we lived in a world where we could have 100, if all of those episodes were somehow made in live action and Hayden Christensen was performing all of it, I'm sure we would have gotten similar those chill vibes. Yeah. But like, I think it was both the execution of the voice acting and of the Lucas's vision
writing.
creating that show. I mean, that
Yeah.
is the Clone Wars, honestly, like, is one of the more impressive things to have built for him, because like it's so expansive and wide reaching and
Right.
covers so many things that reinforces what he already made in a really cool way.
And I will say, much to Hayden, I think it's very much to Hayden's credit, and he said this very publicly a number of times, that he basically credits Matt Latner with keeping the character alive. You know, kind of recognizing that like people didn't really love his portrayal of, or at least a lot of people didn't love his portrayal of Anakin, and that the Clone Wars really helped to kind of rebuild interest in that character. And he's talked about how, and I think this shows that him watching every episode of the Clone Wars and really learning from Matt Latner's portrayal changed how he portrayed Anakin in later portrayals. And I think that that's very much, because I think there's something, I can imagine there being some competition, you know, between live actor and voice actor, and the fact that there's not at all. You know, same thing with Ashley Eckstein and Rosario Dawson. They're clearly very close and have really worked together on feeling like a shared bond over this character.
All I'm saying is Matt's autograph is in my bedroom where no one else can see it. Hayden Christensen's autograph is front and center on a lightsaber in a place of honor for everyone to see. Aaron is giving me a look right now.
I thought that was going somewhere completely different.
I did too. When I was like, we're
wait,
just gonna ride this out.
I'm like, why is it in your bedroom and no one else can see it?
Oh, yikes. Maybe cut that out.
I mean, given his feelings, if it was reversed, it would be even worse.
Oh, gosh.
Well, and that's fine. And that's like your defining memories of, now he gets it. Your defining memories of Anakin are as played by Hayden. My defining memories of Anakin are as played by Matt Latner. And that's
so unfortunate.
Two different versions of the character.
This is so unfortunate.
We got some great listener feedback about this topic that I want to get into in a minute. But just first, for either of you guys, we've talked mostly about Clone Wars, but just in general, what are other things that you think either are great or even can be sometimes frustrating about Star Wars animation?
Yeah, I would like to give a brief manifesto on how amazing Rebels is.
Well, again, we're gonna do stuff about each individual.
Yeah, that's why I'm keeping it real short. I just want to say that the Clone Wars was focused on characters that already existed, and again, amazing job at fleshing those characters out, giving them life. That was its own challenge. The challenge of Rebels was, this is an animated show that they're putting out. It was the first time they were like an entire show created and centered around a new core group of characters, which presented its own challenges, and I thought was done exceptionally well. And like, even though it was, following this one basically, found family, we did get to interact with other known entities in the Empire and connect itself to the originals, to the prequels, to the Clone Wars, while always remaining very much its own show and doing similar to the Clone Wars, exploring some of the more mystical kind of weird things of the Force, probably even more so than the Clone Wars did as a whole. Well, actually, that's not true. Probably pretty much on par. But that's some of my favorite stuff in Star Wars, and I think Rebels does it really well. And shows you like a really unique perspective of what was it like to be trained as a Jedi now outside of the parameters of the Temple and outside the parameters of the Republic. And I think that Rebels is a really unique piece of Star Wars media that we are going to do episodes on it in the future. But I just want to say is one of my favorite pieces of Star Wars media because it's just very unique to me in how it connects and reaches every aspect of the franchise, is really beautiful and emotional. I think some of my favorite moments in all of Star Wars animation exists within that show as well. So I love you, Kanan.
Aaron, what about you? Do you also want to not listen to my request that we talk about animation generally, or do you want to speak?
Listen, we talked about the Clone Wars so much, I had to throw Rebels in.
No, I mean, I love Rebels. I'm just trying to get more of a broader context.
Yeah, I do love what they've done recently of some shorter shows. Like, as much as I'm a content whore, like, feed me, I just want anything. Things like Tales of the Jedi and like, I mean, Visions has multiple seasons, but things that are more like one-off tales.
Yeah.
Just a few episodes. I am really enjoying that as well. Like these deep dives into characters. They're just, I feel like, a little more fleshed out, more thought out. And Tales of the Empire was, I mean, same thing there. I really enjoyed that show as well.
Yeah. But I think it gives them a lot more room to explore. And like I was teasing you, Alex, but I do agree that like giving us a whole new set of characters in Rebels was great. And I just feel like what all this is doing for me is it makes the universe feel a lot bigger. You know, I've said before that like having it be this like small group of people that are all part of one family and they're kind of hanger-ons, it is great, but it makes the universe feel very small. And like getting to see like, yeah, Han Solo wasn't the only smuggler. Look at all these other smugglers and look at like all these other planets that were affected, and look at, you know, yeah, so like here's Ahsoka's backstory, here's Count Dooku's backstory, here's all this other stuff. I think has been really incredible. And I'd say if I have any one frustration with animation, it's that I do think that sometimes, and maybe this is just with me, it does feel like sometimes it I don't even know how to say this. No, I'm not even gonna get into that because forget I said that.
Now I want to know.
Aaron and I were listening very intently.
Okay,
We were ready.
Yeah, we were ready to go.
And I'll say, if I have just like any one frustration with the animation, it is that sometimes, and again, I think this is just how my brain works, that I am a very sort of literal person. And a lot of times I don't know, like, and I know that like, you know, like when I was watching A New Hope, like the herky jerkiness of the X-Wings and TIE fighters fighting each other was real bad compared to what it is today. And it's been remastered and all this kind of stuff. But I don't think I ever got excited for a space battle in any of the animation the way I did for in the live action movies. And you know, there are moments like in Rebels where like they trick the fleet and they get like Admiral Constantine to you know, move out of position by like playing on his ego and his anger, and it's brilliant, it's fun to watch. But just like the sheer thrill of the trench run or of any of that kind of like live action space battle stuff, even some of the great stuff in like the sequels, I've never seen animation equal that for me.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, as a kid, those episodes definitely were not my favorite as well. Like, I loved the Ryloth arc because Boyle and Waxer are two of my very favorite clones ever. Such a sweet, sweet story. But there's an episode called Storm Over Ryloth, and I always skip it.
Yeah.
Because it's about ships and planes, and I was like, I know the plot. I just want to get to the part that I enjoy. So I understand what you're saying, how like an entire 20 minutes spent like focusing on a space battle kind of starts to run long. It's a little harder to stay engaged. And it's definitely like the feeling I get when, and of course this is from the sequels, but the feeling of watching the Raddus and Admiral Holdo like tear through that fleet of First Order ships. Like, I will never get that same like full body chills. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, one of the greatest moments.
Sorry, I got very confused for a second. When I heard Raddus, I was thinking the ship is named after the Admiral in Rogue One. I understand. I'm with you now. Yeah. I'm with you now. I was confused for a second.
Same page again. Yeah, like something like that you just can't portray in the same way over cartoon, like, because it is so hyper realistic now.
Right.
Yeah, I think that what makes the ship has always made the ship battles in Star Wars powerful is even if, I mean, again, I did not see it at its herkiest and jerkiest like you did, Matthew, but I think that like at the time that was still revolutionary to see, and like Star Wars continues to like make these strides to make the space battles feel super realistic and like visually just arresting. And you can't duplicate that in the Clone Wars or in any of the animated shows. So you rely more on the character interactions, which is to me why the most interesting of the space encounters in the animated shows, at least from my perspective, was probably that one with the cloak ship, because it was much more
Admiral Trench.
Yeah, because it was the interesting characters like, you know, Yularen, Trench, and Anakin, all like a little chess match between the three of them. But it wasn't even like the space part that was interesting to me. It was just watching the three of them trying to make moves around one another. It just happened to take place between two ships. But no, I get that, and I think that's fair. I think I definitely like get the same level of excitement for lightsaber fights, certain lightsaber fights in the in like animated shows as I did in live action, but I don't feel the same way about the ships. Yeah, like Ahsoka and Maul and
Ahsoka and Maul, I think, is up there with stuff from the Acolyte as being one of the greatest lightsaber fights of all time. Like, I'd say, to me, I'd say that the top three lightsaber fights are, I think, kind of pretty easy. as Ahsoka Maul, Anakin Obi-Wan, and from Revenge of the Sith, and the head-butting Chimere,
The stranger versus everybody.
Stranger versus everybody.
I'm surprised they didn't put Luke versus Vader up there.
I think that scene is. I would put that scene as one of the top for the emotional weight of it.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
thinking like the emotional weight, especially for me at least, the one in Return of the Jedi just hits me so hard.
Oh yeah, but like the actual fighting, like
Yes.
generally, it's like they spend 20 seconds clashing the lightsabers, and then they go back to their corners and talk to each other.
Yeah.
And that's incredible. And like, I'm fine with that as a fight, and I think it's probably kind of realistic in
A
some
lot
ways.
of posturing. You're right.
But compared to the like, Anakin and Obi-Wan do a lot of that same like 20 seconds of clashing and then
my
back to their corners, but they do it for 15 minutes. And
And there's a lot of spinning.
And Chimere, it's just
No, I agree.
You know.
Visually, I mean, yeah. I mean, like one time my friends and I rented a movie theater to watch something else, and we had 15 minutes to spare, and everyone's like, "Anyone want to watch anything?" And I said, "Give me the comm," and I just put on the Revenge of the Sith lightsaber fight so I could watch it on the big screen.
good man. Good man.
That's so funny.
I like it. All right, let's talk about some of the great feedback we got. So first of all, from the Grand from the Grand Podcastissimo of the True Story family of podcasts that we're part of, Andy Nelson. He writes,
Andy.
"It's hard to go wrong with season 7 of Clone Wars. Honestly, that's some of my favorite Star Wars. It allowed for an incredible resolution to that story. And it's interesting. I feel like in some capacity, I feel a stronger connection to certain versions of characters based on how I meet them than like I vastly have more of a connection to Ahsoka in her Clone Wars version than the live action version. Same with the characters from Rebels who we later meet in live action. I may say the same about Anakin and that era's Obi-Wan, but perhaps it's also because I spent so much more time with them. I also love that the animated shows gave them room to expand the universe so much. They can obviously create vast worlds live action, but in animation, it doesn't require the same level of effects, costume designs, production design, creature design, etc. So they're able to play even more."
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, season 7, when they announced the revival of the Clone Wars and a final season during the pandemic, the darkness that surrounded my existence was temporarily lifted by the mere thought of having that back on my screen. Like that was like, when I think back to like what got me through the pandemic, that season coming out is high on the list for me because it was so special. And I agree that like, you know, you get to spend so much time with these characters and learn so much about them, and just you just spend so much time with them that you get to see them in moments and spaces you never otherwise would. I mean, you get a lot of time with Anakin in his, you know, more than we did in the live action. Anakin like in intimate spaces with Padme, and like, you know, one-on-one time with him and Obi-Wan, and how he trains a youngling. Like it's just you get to like I will agree, Matthew, that like, you know, the Anakin of animation really does like flesh out every side of the character. And so like, you know, like you said, Andy, I think that like you get to spend so much time that like, even if I got to meet Anakin via Hayden Christensen, like I got to really know Anakin through Matt Latner's performance.
Yeah.
I agree. I totally understand being like more bonded to certain versions of characters. Like I will always like Clone Wars and Bad Batch Rex better than Rebels Rex. No,
Facts.
no hate, but that's just the facts. Like
Aaron, who's your favorite Ahsoka variation?
season 7.
That's what I figured.
Yes, it's season 7. I feel so close to her. But also since I grew up with her, that's a bit of an exception. Like I feel very close with every aspect of her. But yeah, that is I've never really thought about it or put it into words, but yeah, it's like you kind of latch onto and like bond with a certain version of the character. So when you see a different version, and this absolutely happened to me when I saw The Mandalorian, like there's just this disconnect of like, that's not the same character. Like when I saw Rosario Dawson as Ahsoka in The Mandalorian, I was like, why are her leku so short? Why is she fucking calm, first of all? And just what is going on? And it honestly took me like years to really fully connect to those characters.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I don't know if I still do fully connect them. I honestly, I feel like I still see them as very different.
I do too. I would still pay a large sum of money to have been in the room the first time Aaron watched Ahsoka descend onto the ground of Mandalore in season 7. I
think I was sobbing, just already sobbing.
I can't even imagine the visceral reaction you must have had.
Yeah.
No, because when I tell you, I
screamed.
watched
I remember
it.
screaming
It was
in my
so
apartment.
Good. It's so good.
Yeah. So another comment we got was from Riki Hayashi, my co-host over on Superhero Ethics.
Oh, love you, Ricky.
Also done so much on this show.
Love that guy.
He writes, I really love what they've done with voice actors, even those who were replacing beloved actors from live action or vice versa. The way that they've interchanged them in some ways, but giving all the actors some agency in the character is really good.
Mm-hmm.
When you see both performers at events clearly show respect to each other is nice to see. One thing I found increasingly frustrating with Marvel What If is when they bring in a new voice actor. I think the fact that Clone Wars just wholesale replaced everyone at the time probably set a better precedent for Star Wars. The Marvel stuff mostly sounds like people trying too hard to do an impression rather than having a similar voice, being allowed to craft the character in their own way. And I think that is really true, and I think that's kind of, and I don't mean to hate on this person, it might be the direction they were given, but I think it's part of why Mace's voice actor stands out, because it really does sound like he's trying to do a Samuel L. Jackson impersonation, whereas no one else is trying to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so true, Riki. Like, how... Hold on, I lost my train of thought. Right. Yeah, Riki, I think that's so true. Like, the ability to give those actors some agency with the character is what makes their portrayals genuine. You know, like every actor, and I'm speaking as an actor, I did community theater, guys, I'm kidding. But it's like a big part of trying to like connect and find yourself within the character so that you can give an accurate portrayal of them. Because if you have a character and you know their traits and you know how they talk and you know this, and then you put it on like it's a mask, that's not good acting. That's copying.
Yeah.
And so it's just so true that like you need to, these voice actors did such a good job clearly of like truly connecting with their characters, and they came out so real and genuine, but also like so damn similar. Like it's really, I think you're kind of right, Matthew, about the concept of like, if you get in your head about trying to do an imitation or a portrayal of a different voice, then it's going to sound like crap. But if you just are familiar with the other voice and you say, this is the character, this is how I feel, and I view this character, and I'm going to go from there.
Yeah. Because I think also there's a lot more to like the way you sound in terms of like the noises you're making, but also just the intonation of how you say words, you know, and like the rhythms and the patterns. And I do think that like all three of the voice actors who've done Obi-Wan now, or the actors who've done Obi-Wan, one voice, 2 live action, I think all have a very similar, he's got a very distinctive way of speaking. And all three, I think, have captured that so well.
But they each give you a slightly different aspect of the character that when taken together does make sense. And it's very believable this is all the same person and it's all the same character, but it's all there because each of them interpreted the character in their own special way.
So one last comment I want to read out, and then we'll wrap up this episode. Corsiano says, I agree with everything above. Clone Wars and Rebels are hands down some of the most interesting, compelling, and emotional aspects of Star Wars entries. Favorite moments would have to be Season 5, Episode 6, The Gathering. What is interesting looking to... What an interesting look into the process into a Padawan obtaining their first Kyber crystal, and creating their first lightsaber. Another is the Last Night story arc from Rebels. Still makes me cry to this day.
Please. The first one, I so agree. I love that little arc. It's so special to see. Like, we see younglings, you know, being slaughtered or being taught from like afar, but we've never had that perspective of like what it is to be a youngling. And, you know, like the excitement of like, holy shit, I'm a Jedi. But then the pressure of like, holy shit, I'm a Jedi. Like,
right.
You got to ball out. Like, and I loved seeing all of that. I really liked that arc as well. And I mean, that specific episode was really good.
And I kind of like Yoda is a dick in that episode.
He sucks. He sucks.
Yoda allows these kids to believe that unless they find their crystal and get back in time, they will freeze to death. And that they have to help each other, and the part of the, they have to learn to sacrifice themselves for each other. But like, he full on convinces these kids they're about to die. Like,
eventually he turned into much more of a troll than that, but I think he started off real serious, and that led to his trolling of Luke later in life.
I'm just saying, I was like, the man has some therapist friend in the Jedi Temple who he's making a lot of money for. Except the Jedi Temple famously does not have therapy and should.
Facts. I want to speak to. Oh, sorry. I was going to speak to the other episode quickly, just like the Jedi Knight.
Yeah, what is Last Night? I don't remember that at all.
I think it's actually called Jedi Knight. I could be incorrect on that, but it's the episode that Kanan dies.
Oh, okay.
And what I love about that episode is it starts off very like between the music and everything. It's very atmospheric. You feel very connected to Kanan, and you see how he feels connected to the world around him. And it's just like, I don't know, the whole episode. You feel really upbeat and positive, and like, we can do this. We can save Hera. We can deal a blow to the Empire. We can do this. And you do not. There is no inkling that Kanan Jarrus is going to die until it happens. And then when it happens, it is. This is going to sound maybe ridiculous, but one of the most emotional deaths for me in all of Star Wars is that death. Like,
I agree.
The way that he, like. I didn't even know it was possible to feel that deeply about a character that I've only seen for a few seasons, but he just, the way that he in Jedi Patch sacrifices himself, and like basically the Force rewards him by giving him his sight back to see Hera one last time, like his wish.
Stop.
I literally, I'm about to cry just thinking about it. That to me is one of the greatest feats of animation Star Wars has ever done. Just that one episode. So I totally agree with that episode is in my top 3 of all Star Wars animation ever made.
Yeah.
It's so emotional. And as we all know, if you've listened to this podcast before, Alex Corman loves to be hurt by Star Wars. So
Facts. I want to say just real quick about that episode. I watched Rebels through like the mindsets. Okay, so when Disney took over Lucasfilm and they canceled the Clone Wars, I was like, fuck Disney. And then they came out with Rebels and I was like, fuck this show. It's not the Clone Wars. And then I watched a few episodes and forgot about it for like years. And then I finally came back because I was like, it's 2020, right? The new season's coming out. I'm excited and I want to watch some just like happy stuff because it's 2020. So I'm like, let me finish this series. And I was fucking bitch slapped. I literally like fell to my knees in a Walmart. Like, it was horrible. Like, I was beside myself. I could not believe what just happened because I was like, this is supposed to be the fun show. Yeah. This is supposed to be the easy show. And it, like you said, Alex, there's no inkling. It came out of fucking nowhere. And I remember the credits rolled and I just like sat on the ground. By the way, I was pacing in front of the TV the entire time.
The credits were silent.
I just sat on the ground. I was like, what comes next? Like, the show's over.
And after that, after his death, the show takes a very distinct, sharp turn towards more like of the spiritual and like out there like stuff of the Force, the world between worlds and the Loth Wolves traveling everywhere and all this crazy stuff and the Purrgil coming to save the day. And to me, after he dies, it's devastating, but the show really just comes into its own. And then it ends a season later and I'm devastated, even though it like ends kind of perfectly. Show is.
Doesn't he die like 4 episodes before the end?
Yeah, 4 or 5 episodes, yes, but it is half a season, and it's devastating that it happened so quickly.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
All because after that is when all the really weird shit starts happening. I'm here for the really weird shit. Just saying.
He likes the weird shit.
I've probably said too many things this episode that came across terribly wrong.
Look, when you started to defend the people of Nazi Germany, my hackles got up. But no, you did it perfectly because what you said made total sense. And it reminded me of the that great quote from Captain America of the first countries the Nazi invaded was Germany. That's a much deeper conversation, obviously.
It is. And I want to just clarify on air. I very much do not think the Nazis are good people. If that was not very clear, I was just saying that not everyone
I did
knew
not come
what the
off
Nazi
that way.
Party was actually doing.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and that it's that it is easy to look at the people who are easily fooled by propaganda or who are concerned enough about a current situation to feel like that they'll go along with any amount of hate and I think we should have a lot of judgment for that, but also some understanding of the terrible situation that someone's already in that causes that, you know, how awful things were in Germany at the time. And that, like, I hate that people like, I mean, it's a whole other topic, but
I've taken multiple classes on that topic specifically. It's fascinating, but it's so sad.
It's like all this. There's just so much more nuance than just saying like, oh no, they were all good people, or oh, they were all just
which
as any Nazi.
To bring it full circle, Matthew, is something explored so deeply in all of these shows, which is crazy again. But I'm sorry, which is really amazing again that a children's show can explore those exact topics you're talking about in an effective way.
100%. 100%. All right. Well, thank you both. We're going to have a little more fun in the members only section. For those of you who have not joined, please think about becoming a member. $5 a month, $55 a year. You can also, of course, get a subscription to Audible and help support this podcast. You can buy a lightsaber and help support this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
All the information is in the show notes. All those things are awesome. You're awesome. I'm awesome. Alex is awesome. Aaron is awesome. Star Wars is awesome. Animation is awesome. Everything is awesome. And
everything is cool when you're part of the team.
Exactly.
Everything is awesome.
I'm going to sleep tonight now.
We've sung.
Stay classy, Mortis.
There's one thing you've forgotten. I'm no Jedi. And that's Rex's version from like the 4th season, not Ahsoka Tano, just to put it out there.
Yep.
Yeah, facts. But you mean right before he throws a spear in the slaver's chest?
Exactly, yeah.
Before we do the bonus section, give me 10 seconds to see what hoodlum behavior Autumn is partaking in.
Go for it.
Yeah, were we supposed to read something?
Nope. I did not come up with anything, and then I just came up with something right now.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like, I did nothing to prepare. My night did not go the way I expected it to.
It is my job to prepare, and I did not. Oh, and I have 2 snaps from some McGowan person.
She somehow went into the bathroom. And closed the door on herself and locked herself in the bathroom.
Just clear off the random shit from my counters. So it's like, now I have no fucking idea.
We're friends on Snapchat? I forgot about that.
Sorry, Alex, you were saying.
No, I was just saying that Autumn somehow got into the bathroom. Well, not so much. Walked into the bathroom and I guess was playing with the door and like closed the door on herself and locked herself in the dark bathroom. So I had to free her.
Poor baby.
Yep.
Poor
Well,
girl.
having
You
a
have
cat.
to save her from herself.
Little dumb baby, but yes.
Yep.
All right, Alex has a cat to take care of. I have friends who are pregnant. Yeah. All right. Well, Alex has a cat to take care of. I have friends who have a newborn to take care of. Aaron has studies to take care of. So we're going to make this pretty quick. Nice, simple question. Let's start with you, Aaron. Top 3 animated Star Wars shows.
Okay, top 3 animated Star Wars shows. Okay, first 2 are easy. Clone Wars, Bad Batch. Period. Don't really need a third, personally. But
Aaron,
I
we're
would
gonna have
say
a fight next time I see you.
let's go. I'll scrap.
Disrespect.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, I really did love Tales of the Jedi. Here's the thing. I'm really excited to get to know and get to love Rebels the same way I did for the sequel series. Okay. I only have watched it the one time through. I had a lot of hate coursing through my body when I first approached the show. So I'm excited to like, Alex is not forgiving me regardless, but that's okay. You don't have to. We can fight about it later. But yeah, I would say Clone Wars, Bad Batch, Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah. No, that is totally fair. And unlike Alex, I'm not a rampant-tater, so I'll go next. My number 1 is...
I'm from New Jersey. It comes with the territory.
My number 1 is Rebels. And my very close number 2 is Clone Wars. And I'll say it's because I feel like... It's funny. I praise Clone Wars for it having such this incredibly wide, broad cast and showing us so much more of the galaxy. And I think that's wonderful. But I think it also means that there are some hits and misses. And there are some plot lines that just don't really hit, or because they were just taking a lot more chances. And I think that's great. And I think Rebels is a much smaller, much more consistent show, but giving us our first on-screen Admiral Thrawn and having him be so good and so sinister, giving us the incredible family, giving us like so much more of Hondo and of Garazeb Aurelius. And I will go down to saying the first, major gay relationship, even though it's not quite exposed, but like the Garazeb and Callus, like Garazeb takes him to meet his family at the end. Like, you know, those two
Mhm.
were, and the voice actors of it.
Agent Callus is a goated character.
And Callus is one of like, there are a number of Star Wars characters who do one noble thing before they die. I will hold that Callus is the only one who has a true redemption arc where he really acknowledges and takes accountability for the pain he's caused and tries to do something better with his life. So Rebels is number 1, Clone Wars is number 2. Number 3 is hard because I actually no, let me say that again. Number 3 is Bad Batch. Because again, like I really have enjoyed some parts of Tales of the Jedi, but some parts I definitely was very disappointed by, and Tales of the Empire and stuff like that as well. I've seen one season of Resistance, and I think it's good, but it has a lot of weak points. And I have not yet seen Young Jedi Adventures, and I'm sure there's one or two I'm forgetting, but for me, Bad Batch is pretty clear. Like those 3, Rebels, Clone Wars, and Bad Batch, I think are cut above the rest. And I will just add, we've never touched on Visions at all. I think Visions is artistically incredible because that's not an art medium that I really relate to. It's probably why I don't rank that show higher, but I do think that that show also did some incredible things.
I am a huge anime nerd. I do love Visions, but my top 3 would probably be 1A Clone Wars, 1B Rebels, nearly inseparable. I almost put them on exactly equal footing as far as I'm concerned. Clone Wars I grew up with. It has a really special sentimental place in my heart. It explores and deepens the characters that I love so deeply. I mean, like Obi-Wan, Anakin are my 2 favorite characters in Star Wars, and they get explored really deeply. But it's very spread out. So, like, you know, sometimes I'll get episodes, you know, like when the droids are all off in the middle of a void planet, and I'm like, I don't care. This is 4 episodes of something I don't care about. Versus Rebels is, you know, I like all the characters and I'm always interested. There's really no like.
Yeah, for me, there's no skippable episodes in Rebels.
There's no skippable episode. The only episode that bores me a teeny bit is the one where they're on the, they're stuck on that planet with the shipbuilder. But even that one's pretty good.
Now, I do want to interrupt. Aaron had a very strong reaction to saying that you love all the characters. Aaron, what's the character?
It was a delayed reaction, actually. It was the reaction for you saying you don't care at all about the droid arc. And while I don't really care about the droid or the tiny frog general, excuse you, we got Commander Gregor.
Okay.
And that was a very important part of the arc.
At the end of the arc, you're right. The Gregor part was amazing. But like my point is, it's like there is filler and skippable stuff in the Clone Wars. There's not really that in Rebels. Rebels was very tight and succinct. And I get really attached to the characters. And it has some of the more emotional moments. Like, I mean, like, again, like the death of Kanan is devastating. Introduction of Thrawn. The freaking, you know, bringing Maul back into the fold again. The episodes on the Sith on Morabad, on Korriban, whichever one you want to call it. Just like so many just like really memorable moments that I just, man, I might just go back and rewatch that show now. It just hits so hard. Rebels is so, I love Rebels so much, but and we don't get to explore that era as much. Okay, point is number 3 for me. Well, Erin can give me hate back after I give her hate. It's not Bad Batch for me. I'm sorry. I think it's Tales of the Jedi. I love learning like little extra details and like getting to see more about Qui-Gon, more about you know, Barriss, more about just all these characters that I've cared about, more about Ahsoka, more about like what has gone on in the parts of their lives I haven't gotten to see before. I live for those nuggets. And while I did like the overall arc of the Bad Batch, and you know, like, you know, I love Omega, I would do anything for her. There is so much filler. It is that show is like 30% filler. And
it's 30% lovely, lighthearted adventures.
Yeah, it's not filler. It's episodic television. Like filler.
You mean like the Godzilla robot that shows up that they gotta beat that one episode? Or
the Zillo Beast returns? Are you kidding me?
Not the Zillo Beast, the mechanical one. They're trying to find a treasure and they end up fighting.
But I think Aaron's point is, why are you like, oh, Clone Wars is great? Clone Wars had a Godzilla Beast as well. It just wasn't.
That's not what I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about how like the Zillo Beast though had a larger purpose within the politics of the Clone Wars, and like hashing out Palpatine's character, Anakin's character, different characters. While they all went to look for a treasure and ended up fighting like a giant robot, which just felt like filler to me. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying that it doesn't do it for me as much. I liked how Bad Batch at the end got more on topic, and I was really when we were in the lab and we were on Tanis and all those things. Like I was here, I was in it. I was like, yes.
All right.
But there was
Well,
just too much other stuff going on that I was just kind of like it wasn't always right on topic on the money for me. It's number 4 for me.
well, I thank you all of you listeners. You've been tuned in to listen to myself and my co-host Aaron and my frequent guest Alex. He's been demoted for being wrong. Aaron, though, you had a last opinion I think to share with us before we moved on out.
I'm gonna get through this
oh
for
boy.
a while.
No, I was just going to. I was just gonna say, Alex, I hear you. Yes, that episode was a little bit fillery. However, it's like the 4th episode of the series. You can't tell me there's not a filler episode in the first 4 episodes of Rebels.
Oh,
Pause.
the first season.
Because I
of Clone
watched
Wars
it
was
and I was
god-awful.
bored.
Season of Clone Wars is tough, but the malevolence is epic. So
We were just talking about the episode. That's so good.
Okay, we have so many screen grabs that I'm gonna do of
It's
Aaron.
fine.
Like,
yeah, y'all. I mean, we're entering. Unfortunately, if we don't stop now, Matthew, it's gonna go into a full blown discussion about everything.
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, this is gonna just get worse.
I mean, I just want to point out that I don't know if y'all have seen this level of passion from us from anything Star Wars. Clearly, we love animation in this house.
Look, it just as long as
do.
you remember that all of these various things of animation, even as bad as they are, they're all better than Revenge of the Sith. So thank you all
Is it
very
better
much.
than Revenge of the Sith?
Now we're both scrapping.
I'm gonna have to
Matthew.
resign from this podcast.